Hello, Newport Harbor High School, TAR TV fans, Sean Bolton, school principal, and I'm here with a living legend, Mr. Joe Robinson, who has been teaching at Newport Harbor High School for 7 decades. 7 decades, think about that. I'm the 12th principal here at Newport Harbor. You have worked for probably 8 principals.
Something like that.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate about Mr. Robinson is not only his vast knowledge of teaching, not only his vast knowledge of a lot of subject matter, but also his frame of reference. Every time we run up against an issue or a problem in education, he can reference back to 6, 7 decades ago, and you start to realize that these problems are not new to schools, they're not new to teenagers, they're not new to educators, that they have been around for a long time, and Mr. Robinson always has the answer. You always have a great way of trying to solve problems.
I always have an opinion. It may not be the answer.
I greatly appreciate that. But sadly, we are losing a treasure here at Newport Harbor High School. Mr. Robinson has decided to retire in 2022. So the class of 2022, consider yourself lucky because you will be going out with Mr. Robinson, the legend. Mr. Robinson, you actually started in 1967 where?
At Ensign.
And what'd you teach?
I was teaching Spanish there. I taught Spanish for 2 years there, and then I came here to be a Spanish teacher here. But I thought teaching Spanish was a little boring. I mean, I love Spanish, and I read Spanish and all that, but the principal looked at my transcripts and said, why don't we, I see you've got a lot of other classes you've studied, so he asked if I would take a history class, and then he said, how about taking the Latin program? And eventually I wound up teaching 3 different departments, and just having fun. It's fun to change what you teach.
I know that I've gone to Heritage Hall and I've looked at various yearbooks throughout the years, and it's just great to see your picture in just about every yearbook going back to that
Every one I get older, don't I?
No, but you think about, okay, I'm probably the 8th principal you've worked with, but just think of the hundreds and hundreds of colleagues that you've worked with, and also the thousands and thousands of students that you've worked with, and you've affected their lives in positive ways. I know we have, Miss Gaylord, for example, went into teaching because of you. She studied what she studied at North Carolina and at Oxford and London because of you, right? Art history, literature.
Sweet.
And I've had so many people come back for Hall of Fame ceremonies, to reunions that I go to, the Alumni Association, individuals involved in the Alumni Association that credit you with being their favorite teacher, one of their favorite classes, and having an enormous impact on their life. And I don't know if you realize that or not, or if that's soaked in yet.
Well, when somebody says, "Wow, you affected me," or "You were nice to me," and it helped, or whatever, when I hear things like that, I really appreciate it. But I'm never sure if I'm having an impact on students, but I am sure they're having an impact on me, and I think that's why I've stayed in teaching so long, because I love what the kids teach me. They've taught me kindness. They've taught me just so many things, and curiosity. And there's so many wonderful things about high school kids that I've been here for many, many years, and I've met. I think I've had like 8,000 students. I've never met 2 alike, and I just love the variety, and I love finding out what are you going to be like in my class, and it's such a thrill, and I will miss that.
Students don't realize that they actually teach us more.
Oh God,
than we teach them.
I mean, if we teach them 1 or 2 little teeny things, we're lucky. Right. But they teach us massive amounts of
and that's really
real life,
the magic of education.
The magic of education, and they teach each other too. To me, that's why Zoom was such a bad way to communicate or to be a teacher, because kids learn from each other and they have to interact with each other, and it's the learning that goes on without me is way more important than the one with me. I think in a classroom.
So when you started here, the school had how many students?
We were really big, 34 to 3,600.
Wow!
So every classroom was filled, and some of the things that are no longer classrooms were classrooms, and we were doubling up, and it was really crowded here. Graduating classes of 800. So those were big days, and then it dropped down to 1,000.
in
at
the 90s, about the 90s.
in the early
it did.
90s,
Yeah.
late 80s, something.
And now
like
we're
that.
about 2,300.
23, which is that's a good size.
What was like the craziest, zaniest class that you saw on the master
zaniest
schedule?
class?
When you arrived here in 1969, you looked at the master schedule and you were like, "Wow,
You mean
I didn't know we
weird
taught
classes?
that." Yeah,
Weird classes. Oh my goodness. I never thought of that.
some unique classes that were taught back then that we
there
don't
was
teach
a woman
anymore.
a woman who taught Spanish who would come in early and teach anybody Mandarin Chinese if they wanted.
Wow.
And another woman would teach Russian if they would come in early. The school wouldn't offer it as a class. They didn't have
Right.
enough students. But so there was that.
We had auto shop.
We had auto shop, we had drafting, we had metal shop, wood shop, and so what is now computers? Computer labs were the shops, and people say we should get those back to wood shops, and I think, aren't computers the tools of our time? I mean, isn't it better to be able to work on a computer than to fix a car? I don't know,
Right.
But I do wish the kids had more hands-on stuff,
Do
and
you
more
think
experience.
school was harder back then, or do you think it's harder now? Do you think the academic rigors changed a lot over the years?
Yeah, yeah. I think I kind of blame the colleges, as they've upped their whatever. There's become a frenzy for getting into colleges, and so the kids feel the pressure, and they're taking way too many AP classes and IB classes to impress colleges, rather than because they want to be there
Right.
and learn something. So I think the kids are more pressured now, and we had some great demanding teachers in those days, but I think it's harder now for the kids, and they feel more pressured. You look pressured. No, I'm kidding. But it is. I feel bad for them, and I didn't back in the old days. I go, "God, would you guys get organized here?" It's like
Right.
It feels different.
So, no pressure here and no pun, but who do you think your favorite teaching colleague was through the years, or is?
Wow. Well, there's this kid that teaches history that I really think is spectacular. And it's annoying because his last name happens to be Robinson.
Yeah, he's G. Rob and you're
Yeah,
J. Rob.
I'm J. Rob,
Yeah.
and it's really annoying when kids will walk in and go,
Mr. Robinson, you used to be my favorite teacher, but now it's your son.
But I'm very proud of that,
Yeah.
and I love when they do that. But he's
And I think it goes without saying that invariably you'll be in the Hall of Fame one day, and you've really helped us identify some of the giants here, some of the teachers that we stand upon their shoulders here, and I think that every educator has an obligation, and every principal has an obligation to leave the school better than you found it. And I truly believe the people that we've elected into the Hall of Fame left the school better than they found it. They made it a better institution than they found it. Who do you think in the Hall of Fame is someone that you really like? Fabian Giroux or Margot Cunningham or Danny O'Hearn?
I was the closest to Fabian. He was a very kind man, and he would invite new teachers over to his house for dinner, and any new teacher, and he would just have them and just kind of make them feel more comfortable. And we formed a fast friendship, and we were good friends, and I would have lunch with him after he retired, and he really impacted me. He was a brilliant history teacher, and he taught me. I started reading even more because of him, and we would read history books and talk about them together and stuff.
Yeah.
So he was a real mentor. But I admired so many of them that are in Bob Wentz. Oh my God, what a hero!
Right.
The first day of school, my first day at Harbor High, I was checking in at the front desk, and he walks up. He goes, "Hey, you're new," and he shook my hand and he said, "Tell me your name." And he just talked to me, and he walked away, and I went, "I want to be like him."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he was just a legend. He was amazing,
Right.
and just 2 minutes, I picked that up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you wanted to go to Newport Harbor High School. You grew up in the area.
I did, yeah.
Right? And you wound up going to Mater Dei, but you wanted to come here.
Yeah. I went 7.5 years of public school when I loved it, and I loved being there. And my mom and dad decided you need to be in a Catholic school.
Right.
So at the second semester of my 8th grade year, they put me in St. Joachim's, and it wasn't a very good experience, but for some reason that convinced me to go to Mater Dei.
Right.
And so I wound up there, and I've always regretted it.
Right.
I wish I'd come here. But.
And where did you go to college?
Oh, I went in after Mater Dei. I went into a seminary and studied to be a priest.
Right.
It's a 4 years college and then 4 years graduate school.
Right.
And I did the 4 years college and 3.5 years of graduate school, and took like 24 units a semester for 7.5 years. So, hence all the classes I've taken.
Right.
But some of our classes were conducted in Latin, so obviously I
Right.
picked up some skills there. I learned Spanish there and classical Greek. So that was a good experience. But,
And then you left there. You didn't become a priest, obviously. You became an
Right.
educator, which,
Right.
in many ways, I think priests, educators, doctors, we all serve. We serve people.
Yeah, I felt that was a good transition. I wanted to serve people, but I didn't want to live alone. Priests
Right.
live alone, so
Right.
I thought, well, it'd be more fun to come home at night and share your experiences with the spouse, and so.
Absolutely. So what do you think was the hardest time here at Newport Harbor or through the years? I mean, we've gone through a lot in the last 5-6
Yeah.
years here.
COVID's got to be right up there.
I mean,
with the
COVID's
hardest.
got to be up there along with some other calamities. But like through the years, you've talked a lot about the Cultural Revolution, Vietnam, the energy crisis of the 70s, the Cold War of the late 70s and 80s, kind of the Cultural Revolution of the 90s. What posed the greatest challenge to you, or what year, or what decade, or?
That's a tough question, Sean. I mean, they're all challenging, and they're all.
Right.
But at the time, you just deal.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to confession to you, and I've never told any other principal, so don't tell anybody. I hope this is not on record. But we used
Well,
to
it
have.
is on record,
Oh,
so.
darn it! We used to have TAs, teacher assistants. And it would be, you'd have like 2 or 3 per class. They didn't know where to put these kids because they couldn't do much else. So they sit in, and I'd file those papers or, anything. Well, during the gas crisis in 1973, to get gas, like it was odd days, even days. Monday, Wednesday, Friday were, your license plate had an odd number on the last number was an odd number, you could get gas. You couldn't get gas on an even,
Right.
So you had to go every other day, and the lines were down Irvine from, there was a gas station on the corner of Irvine where the Chase Bank is now, and it would go all the way down to Mariner School.
Oh, wow.
It was like an hour wait to get
Wow.
gas. So one of my TAs was a senior, I'd give him my keys, go get me gas. And he would sneak off campus to get me gas. That's not a challenge, but
No, hey,
I
I
probably broke some rules.
I went to high school in Los Angeles, and our health teacher, Mr. Parr, used to give us the keys to his Jeep, and we used to go get him lunch.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, I mean, those days have changed.
He and I will
obviously,
get
right?
fired together.
Huge liability now. But we've talked a lot about student groups here, right? And how students interact and commingle, and the sociology of our school, in the sense that we want more students from diverse backgrounds seeing eye to eye, getting along, having conversations, tolerating one another, loving one another. And we seem to have groups on campus. And at times, it seems like we make a lot of progress in trying to get different student groups together. Like, for example, the Latinos Unidos dance tomorrow night.
Right.
There'll be a lot of different student groups there tomorrow night enjoying one particular student's group's culture, music, food, right?
Yeah.
But you were saying, like, back in the late 60s, early 70s, you had the surfers, the hippies, and the jocks.
Surfers, yeah, hippies, yeah.
And then, like, the jocks would wear saddle shoes,
Yeah, the jocks / cool kids,
Right.
Jocks, cheerleaders. There was
Letterman
a group.
jackets.
Everybody,
Yeah.
they wore the jackets and all that stuff. So they were over there, and if you don't look like one of them, you didn't dare wander over
Right.
to that group, and everybody knew where they belonged. And of course, it was very few minorities in those days. You look
Right.
at the yearbooks, and you see pretty much the same kind of kid.
Right.
And so with the influx, I think we are like a way better school now because we have so many Latinos and
Yeah, I
people,
agree.
other cultural groups.
Yeah.
It's just made us the richer school for it.
Yeah.
and I think that was wonderful. You know, you talk to kids, you know, and we still have a little issue where we have, you know, different groups sitting at lunch, but if you talk to kids in class, kids are so open. You guys are so not discriminating. You're just not sure how to go about making change. But if you talk to kids in class, they go, well, let's get that fixed. You know,
Right.
they really are very positive. That's why it's so embarrassing that these people dare to use their racist crap and humiliate our school
Right.
when it's not true. It's just not true of Newport
Right.
kids. You are kind and accepting people, and I.
But I think that's why I've always enjoyed talking to you is that, you know, the backdrop of America, we're not tone deaf to some of the racial, political, and social issues in our country.
No, not at all.
And you've gone through the peaks and valleys of all those issues throughout the decades, and you always give sage advice and feedback on what it was like back in the day. And you can see parallels, you can connect dots and make connections between those
Are you
eras,
saying it's better to
right?
be old?
I think there's wisdom there.
Well, I hope so. I don't always feel very wise, but having Quinn in class really makes me wiser.
What piece of advice would you give a new teacher or a teacher that's had 2-3 years in the profession?
Really get to know the kids. You know, really try to, you know, just watch them and watch for the sad ones, especially. You know, there's always sad kids in class, and they hide in the back, and sometimes they act kind of weird because they're sad, and just watch for them. And if there's, just watch for any clue that maybe they're looking to talk to an adult, and it might be some other adult, but it might be you.
Right.
That they'll talk to. So give them that chance. Just
Right.
be aware that kids need to talk to adults.
Right.
Sometimes one-on-one. So
What do you see, and where do you see Newport Harbor in the next 10, 20 years?
better and better. We
Better
got good
and better.
leadership.
Am I your favorite principal? No.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Oh, seriously. The rest of them are dead, so it's okay.
Right.
It usually kills you, the job. So.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough.
Well.
And it's going to be bittersweet, but you will be giving the commencement faculty reflection at graduation.
Oh, that's a surprise.
You will be, we're going to honor you in a couple of other ways, but we are truly losing a treasure, Joe. And I really feel like all the students and faculty that have had the pleasure of working with you and beside you have been gifted by your intellect, your love, your touch, the magic that you bestow on all of us. And I love you. And I know a lot of people love you too. And so congratulations on 7 decades at Newport Harbor High School. There will never be another person like you. And there'll never be another person
Thank God
who is
for that.
here that long, though. And
probably
dedicates
not, yeah.
their life to education. So thank you on behalf of all the sailors, all of Newport Harbor High School for everything.
Thank you,
Honestly.
Sean. You're the man.